Today we spent a lot of time talking about ways to make your crafting sustainable and eco-friendly. And I've got Kathy Elkins with me from Webb's, America's Yarn Store. And we're going to talk a little bit about just the different kinds of yarn that you might see, some unusual yarns that you might see when you go to the yarn store, so that you have a little bit of an idea of what it's like to knit with them, what it's like to work with them. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Uni, how are you?
Pretty good.
I brought a sampling of 3 different yarns here, and there's lots of organics on the market right now, but I brought 3 of my personal favorites to talk about today. The first one, to your immediate right, is 100% bamboo, and this fiber has been on the market for several years now and has really taken the marketplace by storm. It's been an extremely popular fiber. It's very sustainable, regenerating. Bamboo grows sort of like a weed in the wild, if you will. When working with bamboo, a couple of things you need to keep in mind. Number one, the finished fabric you're going to have is going to have beautiful drape and beautiful sheen, but it's also going to be very heavy. So when you've finished your garment and you're thinking about storing it, you really want to make sure that it's folded on a shelf or in a drawer and not hung, because it will grow and lose its shape very quickly.
Well, and how and what would you typically knit with a bamboo?
Oh, you can do anything. I've seen beautiful tanks. I've seen gorgeous shawls. We have one customer who did a beautiful bridal shawl for her daughter out of it. You know, you're not really limited in what you can knit. It's just being aware of how the fiber is going to behave once it's put into a garment.
And if you say that, you know, I'm assuming, you know, because it's inelastic, I guess it stretches a little bit. Would you typically knit to gauge or smaller than gauge, or?
We would suggest knitting to gauge, and if you're going to do more of a lace project, then the growth factor, the stretching factor is even more exaggerated. So you just really have to be careful. And you also have to be careful in your knitting process as well, because if you're doing, say, a big lace shawl with it, your working piece is going to get very big, and you want to be very gentle while you're working with it.
Well, and just working carefully to make sure you're not splitting stitches or anything.
Exactly,
like that.
And especially with bamboo, it can be a splitty yarn, and that's something you need to be aware of and take a little bit more care with that.
Well, I mean, it does have a lot of advantages, though. It's got really just beautiful drape.
And it breathes. The garments, when you wear it, they just feel so cool on the skin, and they're very comfortable to wear in really all climates.
Well, and the colors are great.
Yeah, it takes dye beautifully.
So what do we have here?
This is linen, and linen has been, you know, a fiber since, you know, hundreds of thousands of years. Linen and I are not particularly friends, although we've come a long way. Linen has a very harsh, crisp feeling to it, and it's that way when you're knitting with it. It's not a very friendly yarn. It doesn't have a lot of give to it, and it can actually, we've had some customers where it's really hurt their hands to work with it, but it is so worth it, because once you finish your project and you put it through a wet finishing process, the drape and the feel is like nothing else. There is no other fiber that compares.
Well, and it's really the original easy care yarn, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
when you say wet finishing, how do you finish your linen garments?
I actually soak them in some water in my tub, or I have a special pail that I use at home with a little bit. You can just use baby shampoo. You can even, I sometimes put in wool wash, even though this is only linen, but just to soften it a little bit. You can really beat up on it. And when I've woven with linen in the past, and I actually boil it and freeze it.
Wow.
It's a little torturous for the yarn, but it comes out with a beautiful finished fabric.
There are a lot of times when I just machine wash my linen, just because it, you know, the softer it gets,
absolutely,
you know, the more beautiful it is, and it lasts forever.
Absolutely. And then this last one is one of the newest fibers on the market, and it really was intriguing when we first saw it during our buy meetings. This fiber is made from the sugarcane plant.
I see.
I know.
Okay.
What will they think of next?
Right.
It's fabulous. What was really interesting is when we first saw this fiber, it was in its undyed form, and it was slippery and you know, it was soft, but it didn't have a lot going on for it, and I was really worried about knitting with it in terms of the slipperiness. When it came in the dyed format, the dye, this fiber has taken the dye so beautifully. It's actually given it a little bit more body, and in knitting with it, it's given it a little bit more stability. It's so soft, and it has you know, a sheen a little bit different than bamboo. It's almost, in some ways when you look at it, you almost think that there's another fiber blended in there, but it's not. And this has just been a hit for spring and summer projects.
It's really beautiful. So all 3 of these are plant fibers, right? And linen, you know, we all know that linen is actually made from threads within the flax plant, but you know, a bamboo plant and a sugarcane plant. How do you get
well,
yarn out of that?
They're not sitting in these factories just putting stalks of bamboo into machines or you know, feeding it onto a spinning wheel of some sort. No, they actually break down the plant fiber and then regenerate it into a yarn. And I've never actually had the opportunity. I've only read about the process, but I would love to have the chance at some point to go and see how it's actually done, because I find it really fascinating.
It's pretty amazing. What would you recommend, just, you know, in terms of just working with these fibers? You know, I see that you brought a little tin of hand balm.
Yep, you need to think about, especially with some of the softer yarns, the bamboos and the sugar canes, and even some of the organic cottons that are on the market. They are very soft, and if your hands tend to be dry, which mine do, it's really important to keep your hands moisturized so that you don't snag it, especially things like bamboo. It can snag very easily when you're working with it, so you know, the slight little bit of roughness or a callus on your hand could do some damage to the fiber, so it's good to keep your hands moisturized. You need to think about needles, and again, I know a lot of people love using metal needles, and for me they have their place, but for some of these slipperier yarns, not so much.
Well, these are all great tips. And thank you so much for watching. We've had a great time with you this season. See you next time on Knitting Daily, and until then, remember to make time for yarn every day.
Knitting Daily. Make time for yarn every day. Visit our website for free access to all the patterns, project ideas, tips, and techniques from this season of Knitting Daily. Log on and get printer-friendly patterns and more at knittingdailytv.com. This is show 313. Take your knitting to the next level. Visit knittingdailytv.com for your free e-booklet of 13 tips, hints, and secrets to improve your knitting skills from the designers featured on Knitting Daily TV. Knitting Daily has been sponsored in part by Interweave Magazines and Books, inspiring, encouraging, and supporting creative self-expression through art and craft media. interweavestore.com. Webs, America's Yarn Store, a source for knitting and crocheting yarns and supplies. yarn.com.